Studio, I just saw someone look out the window, and I'm hoping it's Lieutenant Strong. Let's go knock on the door and see if we can get her to speak with us.
Can I help you?
Lieutenant Strong.
Yes.
Hi, we're Strength and Truth News, and we wanted to take a moment to speak with you about your experiences, and we'd be wondering if you'd be willing to talk with us.
Strength and Truth News? Well, that's rich. LASD wouldn't listen to me. Maybe you will. Go ahead, come on. Come on in. I was going to make some tea. Follow me. Help! Caden's delay, Caden's count, Caden's count. New author, master's degree, television show, still coming for me. Hit it, hit it, hit it, hit it. Hey, CC Strong here, and today is the day, 3 years to the day that I was wronged by staff members within the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. I immediately spoke out in videos and through the news media, back then and now, 3 years later. This is part 2 of I Made the Call, They Came for Me. I will share more snippets from the past 3 years since my placement under an unwarranted and fully fabricated investigation. I sit here in my most comfortable attire and my signature baseball cap, as it is just more relaxed for me. I am wearing my new WUJC Inc. clothing brand, my Christ One jersey, an original design and what I see as my armor, as in the book of Ephesians in the Bible. Opening an e-commerce store with my originally designed faith-based clothing brand was one of the many things I did to tamp down the hurt, mistreatment, racism, sexism, and so much more that I experienced at the hands of some of the people within my law enforcement agency, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. I say some of the people, as many are still working to do the right thing and always have for many years. I know because I worked with many of them and was one of them, and I continue to be, despite the image shift the fabricators wanted for me. If this is you and you work hard in your position, I sincerely thank you. Please keep carrying the torch for honor, pride, and integrity the right way. As I was speaking about all the negative consequences that came with being wronged by an agency that leans in on brotherhood and occasionally sisterhood inclusion, I failed to mention the betrayal that I received as a payment for all the years of honesty, integrity, honor, courage, my intellect, ingenuity, motivation, good character, and mentorship to others along the way. I guess this is as good of a time to let you know that I'm writing a series of books about these experiences, beginning with my first ever published book, Betrayal in the Badge. You can check that out on Amazon at another time. But I'm about to take you on a journey and a walk in my shoes from the day I was placed under investigation until today. 3 years. So, stick around and stay tuned.
Have you ever been wronged and felt betrayed by your company? Well, it happens to many people, and not just those in law enforcement. If you're looking for ways to navigate the choppy waters of employment, stick around to the end and find out how you can protect yourself and work not to have your name ruined along with the potential loss of your career. If you have any questions, reach out to ccstrong@gmail.com. Once again, ccstrong@gmail.com.
My name is Cedra Sherrod Strong. I am a lieutenant with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. I have served as a law enforcement officer for the past 29 years. 3 years ago today, I was placed under an unwarranted, fabricated, undeserved investigation, chock full of baseless lies. During our time together today, I will highlight the critical points in the investigation, which is riddled with falsehoods that you might find very interesting. Grab a cup of your favorite beverage, a blanket, and even some popcorn. I'm actually having peppermint tea because I like as the old saying goes, I'm about to spill some for sure. But in this case, I'll be spilling the LT because I'm lieutenant. Hey, that's the next book in my series, Spilling the LT. See how all of it worked out for my good? Even the things meant to break me? That's Romans 8:28, if you missed that part. So let's go. I'll begin with early 2019 and the change of the guard in the position of my supervisors. This happened again and again and again, 7 times total actually in the span of just under 3 years. It was all a musical chair game due to the former sheriff and his massive chop and dismissal of the top executives within the department. His vengeful game of cat and mouse began right there. I had 7 immediate supervisors and 5 chiefs over just 2 years and 9 months. As one could imagine, this was a constant reset of explaining the unit and all that was required to run it for each newly assigned executive. Couple this with some multiple leaps and promotions, and it was me speaking to peers who suddenly woke up to overnight successes and huge decisions some weren't ready for, and others didn't bother to even learn. These people were now in charge of huge responsibilities almost instantly, making decisions about the lives of others. I'm willing to bet that some worked hard to lessen the gap in knowledge and experiences required for the positions. Yet others, like those in my direct upper chain of command, couldn't have cared less. Let's take a look at the supervisors, shall we? Assistant Division Director D hired me in January 2018 from among those who interviewed for the position of unit commander over the food services unit. She was excellent with support and allowed me to own and learn the position and the unit, which she said had been sorely mismanaged. And wow, what I learned that she was right. She was then followed by Captain A, who was confused as to why I needed him as a supervisor when I was already a unit commander who should have been reporting to a commander. Neither of us realized that part of the gameplay had already begun, as this was in late December 2018, or maybe early January 2019, a year after I had arrived and right after the change of the guard in the head seat for sheriff by Sheriff V. Third was Captain M, who told me that he had heard about my work and knew my husband as well. I would be teaching him more than he could be teaching me, given that I had commanded such a different and complex unit. Next came another Captain M, literally, with the same last name initial. I kid you not, who was almost going down the road of challenging my work and even had the secretary start to make corrections to my title. But he at least voiced that he knew that I could handle my own work, and eventually he got it and left me alone. My fifth supervisor was Captain U, whom Commander M informed it was literally ridiculous for me to report to what was, by then, being called an oversight captain. It was some made-up position to lessen my actual standing as a unit commander. Commander M kindly reversed this decision, which seemed to have come out of nowhere without any explanation, by having me report, rightfully so, back to him directly as a commander. Commander M was funny, but amazing. He saw the vision of the unit to continue progressing as it had been when he arrived, and allowed me to grow again in the position. Having this newly reinstated support following the confusion of who I was to report to was refreshing, and I continued to focus on improving the unit overall. This was also during COVID-19, and I needed to focus on the, at the time, 63 locations all over the county, the almost 200-member staff with vacancies growing, despite having hired over 60 people, and a $30 million budget that had been used to play games and lie to the CEO and Board of Supervisors by executives hiding $15 million as part of the lie. Captain U had confirmed as much when we spoke after I became aware that the money had been moved internally and not taken by the CEO's office as I had been originally told. I had even had the division staff requesting of me to write a memo to get my own funding back from whomever had it under a mattress somewhere for the staging. But hey, Sheriff V always blamed the Board of Supervisors for everything under the sun. So why not keep those lies going at this point? Whatever. Back to the supervisory list of shell game confusion. Finally, the right person for the dirty deed was located. Enter Acting Commander W, the tantrum-throwing drama queen who led the charge along with her two supervisors, Chief V and Assistant Sheriff C, to ruin my career. It did not help that I knew what Commander W was all about, and so did many of the people who called me with warnings and best of luck statements, all in sarcasm as they had worked with her as well. None of the first 6 supervisors had problems with me or my work while working as a unit commander. Then suddenly, with the arrival of Commander W and with script in hand, she was all too ready to set me on a course for career destruction. I'm convinced that after being banned off the island with her movement from the captain at Internal Affairs to co-captain with a partner at the Men's Central Jail, by the way, only to be given a promotion to acting commander over me, I'm convinced she was on a mission to follow the directive of the sheriff through her upper chain to ruin my career. All because she saw me only as the person who had testified against him when he was a sergeant. And here I was, with successes as a Black woman at that, who couldn't have possibly been smarter than him. That's impossible. Using his position as a revenge platform, former Sheriff V was said to have told the executive leaders in all the positions at the top of the organization that they had to retire or they would be demoted. The number of people who left was in double digits. Not sure any of you heard about that part. This left him without a command staff. He would spend the next 4 years making a mess of the department by gifting promotions from much lower ranks in leapfrog jump promotions to various ranks, and having people stab each other in the back to gain his favor. He dangled these opportunities like carrots for them to grab. Claiming to have a fair process in these selections, he chose who he wanted and when they would be promoted to assist with his delusional games, playing with people's careers, all because he thought that he had been wronged in all areas of his own career. The problem was, and still is, his arrogance and mistreatment of others, not to mention the racist ideologies that brought him grief. It was his own doing, and he was just too pompous to see it or to care. He was said to have had a hate list of people he felt had done him wrong. I was told by someone who worked on his campaign staff that I was on that list. And why not? I'd only been one who testified against him when he continued to go after my then partner and now husband and I. 17 years before all this happened, with me being placed under investigation. His racist remarks and then attempts to get ahead of any reporting of the disgusting statements by me would lead to all of this mess. His sloppiness didn't help in leaving evidence of his lies on a copy machine. And me being one to keep everything and document anything that was out of the norm, or in this case, downright foul, didn't help. The man despised me because he did me wrong. Please make that make sense for me. Anyone? I would bet dollars to donuts, and any of you can put up the donuts, that he never took responsibility for any of his actions, even as a child. He always appeared to be throwing an inward tantrum within himself, fighting himself and looking for someone to take the blame for things he did to himself. Stiff in his physical movements and in thoughts about anything or anyone who was not like him. He even went as far as marching all the lieutenants and above into the gymnasium early in his tenure as sheriff. And he had us all take off our rank insignia. I guess that was his way of resetting by breaking us down, albeit condescendingly and demeaningly. It was for us to be ready for his authoritative style in bullying. Oh, the irony of them calling me a bully. Unbelievable. At the time, one of his pre-planned assignment executives, Chief of Staff D, even spoke to the level of arrogance in the room. The same Chief D would later cough up on himself and admit to being a member of a deputy gang on the witness stand during one of the Civilian Oversight Commission hearings. To watch someone who held such a high rank within our organization squirm and downplay and squirm on the stand was sickening, as it called into question any decisions he made while in his position, from deputy on up to chief. If honor, character, leadership, integrity, transparency, and all the other podium buzzwords were where we should be, why had this executive not gotten the memo? Wow. Three years ago, today, October 5th of 2021. I think the best part of the day while we were sitting in that gymnasium was the person who started to clap as Sheriff V made it to the front of the group of chairs where we all were sitting. The clapping was from a few people and may have made it 3, maybe 4 contact sounds before abruptly stopping. I think it was as if the people caught themselves or realized he had come from the back of the room and all of us behind the clappers hadn't clapped at all. And we had seen him first. This only served to make the clapping seem sad and isolated. And I saw the look on his face to upset him. Let me take you back to the year of 2004. I will make this brief, as Sheriff V doesn't deserve much more than a brief mention anyway, but his actions were always so foul that they warranted honesty then and now. This is the only way to combat the continued allowance of people to push a narrative that he was a great leader and sheriff. Even if you like what you heard him say, it should not have clouded your thinking about the fact that he removed all of the upper executives from the department on day one and had no other plan in place than marching us into a gymnasium to demean and pit people against each other for positions. Not only is that asinine, but it shows that he does not like something and he just aims to rid it from his space. That is childish and immature, no matter what spin he would try to put on it. Now, before you think I'm being harsh, think about the loss of any semblance of knowledge for running the department. Was he going to do it himself? All by himself? He dismissed the entire top of the pyramid of rank, and you think that was a wise decision. Why? I know. Wait. Some of you did not like some of those people. But be it that as it may, please look at the horrible checker move that he made. Because it wasn't chess. It was just stupid. Then he just put people he hadn't had problems with, who he had worked with, or maybe the two friends he has, in critical positions. This was the starting point for disaster, and it only continued when change could have been made to correct it. I'm guessing it was all about money over the mission. And hey, some could say, God's mine, as they were only interested in the climb up anyway, not improving our beloved department, which only seemed to work in social media posts, and then only for certain groups of people. Yeah, I see the comments in the post. Not the way that we should be behaving with honor. One person spoke about there being dust on the financial binders on the shelves within his office. In 2004, he was my sergeant for about 6 months before what we call it being midnight transferred out. In his case, a foul action that could have harmed young people. While talking on the phone one day, he said, "She's black. How could anyone think she's smarter than me?" I overheard his statement in the copy machine room across the hall from his office. Ending his call, he passed the copy machine room and saw me, turning red in the face as he realized I had been within earshot and heard his foul statement. He would then leave a memo on the copy machine with negative comments about me and my then partner and now husband, Eric Strong. The operations lieutenant would then share that he had addressed the memo on behalf of the captain, with Sergeant back then, former Sheriff V, returning and negating his own lies within the same strain of the correspondence, admitting that there was no problem with us. A series of vengeful acts would happen over the coming years, from lying about a force case, which we had proof was a lie, to a canceled trip with the Police Activities League without informing us. And we had already traveled to Florida with 4 teens. He called and canceled the registration to get to Eric and me in retaliation for his lies not sticking the first time. He was immediately transferred to Carson Station before he even returned from the trip. In the force case, he lied about a year later in additional retaliation. He even wanted to transfer to the Recruit Training Bureau at one point while I was a drill instructor, and that backfired as well, with the captain saying that I was not transferring out and that his request would be handled in another way. Can you say continued anger building over time about me? I mean, the guy hates me, and I happen to be one of those black women he didn't think highly of. How in the world could any black woman be smarter than he? This has to be one of the most racist statements anyone could make, to lump all black women into a group not rising to his level of intelligence. He is as delusional as they come, with many during my years in the department saying the same things about him, that he was arrogant beyond his capabilities and always thought he was the most intelligent person in any room. I pity people like him who can't get out of their own racist way. I pity people who support his way of thinking even more as they enable this type of behavior and show their own hands while doing so. Let's talk about the inquiry. An inquiry is used when information is received about a person or occurrence that could rise to the level of discipline for anyone responsible, culpable, involved. A person is assigned to look into the allegations, seeking facts supporting the need to open either a unit-level investigation or one that will require the Internal Affairs Bureau. In my case, Sergeant S, the aide to Commander W, and even to Commander M, who preceded Commander W, was guided through an inquiry into the anonymous complaints about me. Instead of allowing her to do the inquiry, she was assisted by Commander W with some of the interviews of those who each had an axe to grind with me. One person who was said to have made herself known in a complaint through email had already complained about the same fabrications 2 years before. This complainer had already filed claims documented in ombuds ticket numbers, yet used them repeatedly to go after me. She left the unit in early 2019 following a complaint that initially spoke of only Manager T and his mistreatment of her. The same manager who seems to have escaped all of this. The manager who knew about the moldy bread 2 days before it was served to inmates and allowed it to be served anyway. This email complainer also included the information in her email about it being primarily a complaint about Manager T. But this didn't support their narrative, so they went forward with all of this trash anyway. Despite the information being already tried years earlier, the commander ran with the information and fashioned a case out of the old information and lies, adding anonymous letters. Instead of doing the right thing, the other executives allowed this to all play out and continued without any independent thought. It is a scary thought, and any wonder the public doesn't trust us. We can't even trust ourselves. Sergeant S showed herself to be one who just followed orders and made a flip switch against me almost immediately once all of these lies kicked into even higher gear. Before this, she likened my successes to me wearing a cape and even likened me to being a shero. We had only had professional and pleasant contact and were able to get work done in support of the previous commander, Commander M, whom she worked for, until the newly gifted promotional recipient and career slayer, Commander W, showed up. The witnesses were plentiful and eerily familiar as some of the same groups of people my supervisor had reached out to and even taken to lunch, as there were well-wishers in the crowds in attendance to those luncheons who named those seated at the table with my supervisor. She groomed these witnesses to perfect pitch to put all of this in place. And it was oh so easy for people who had been held accountable to take their shot at defaming my character for the ability to place a cap on and seal their own wrongdoing. I mean, you had the ultimate in laziness with some of the people at the unit. The primary complainer in my case was an operations assistant 3 who should have had massive experience with at least the very basic computer skills, and she needed 2 weeks to complete a chart. The most basic of charts that I said to create anyway that she liked for reporting information through her chain of command to me. After 2 weeks and her inability to complete the chart, she passed it on to one of her subordinates and made excuses for not following the simplest of directions. She even went as far as whining about me not liking her, when quite frankly, I had little interaction with her up to that point and had been busy having a huge impact with positive change in the unit. Another person on the list of witnesses, when caught for having lied about being light duty and working a desk for years as a law enforcement technician, suddenly claimed I grabbed his hands and risked looking for tattoos. This had allegedly happened a year before his reporting of it. So he reported it in late 2019. So he claimed I did it in 2018. It was deemed unfounded back then, yet Commander W and Sergeant S helped created the windstorm of a lying Operations Assistant 3 and his information along with others. These witnesses included someone who filed false documents for COVID-19 pay, another one who played games with my ergonomic equipment that I needed for a horrible back injury, another staff member who was promised a promotion and had the 2 people on her panel listed as references, the same 2 people who changed her scores to guarantee her promotion, only to have one of them think that they could explain it all to me and I'd be okay. I guess they figured I would understand and gift the promotion to the undeserving person just because they all went way back in their time together as cooks. Oh, and let's not forget the very unprofessional, loud, and rude grown man who challenged me to have a few drinks and settle this sworn versus professional staff thing as men, if only I was one. Shall I continue? There was a woman who wanted to go back to her assignment at the women's jail so badly that she too joined the circus of lies and spoke about me playing favorites with headquarters staff. And she worked in a kitchen and was rarely at headquarters, rarely working around me, save for the training when she got promoted. The inquiry contained her racist remark about a group of people not even fitting the term she used to describe a white male, Hispanic male, 2 Hispanic women, and me. Yet we were said to be the 5 Fantasticas, a name she claimed was widely used to describe my headquarters staff. Yet no other witnesses could back this claim, nor did the investigators seek to check. The inquiry by Sergeant S was poorly written and contained storytelling of folks with complaints I could prove were false, old complaints. Yet the 2 inquiry planners never bothered to check into anything I could speak to in defense of the claims. Why would they? Who goes off script when lying at this level and to this degree? The entitled mindset of high-ranking liars is astounding and so familiar. I do what I do because of the position I hold. Don't challenge me. Do as I say. And the sergeant aide was all too ready to do just that. I imagine her nodding her head in agreement with anything that came from the commander, good or bad, all because of the rank, not what is right. Ready to follow someone off a cliff if needed, with no independent thought for a life raft to maintain anything resembling integrity. The inquiry, like the entire IAB case, was a farce, and my supervisor's memo cover sheet wasn't any better. She was all too ready to make me a villain. She then passed this information on to the Internal Affairs Bureau, leaning on the fact that she had once commanded IAB as the unit commander and then fallen from grace with being removed. From the investigators and all the way up the chain, this case should never have happened, but it did. And no one was strong enough to do the right thing, even those who pretended that they would. Shamefully, sad excuses for human beings are what they are, in my opinion. I have prayer for them, though, not disdain. Let's talk about my lack of evaluations during all this. How in the world did they miss this little nugget of reality? I had not had an evaluation in 3 years, probably because there had been no problems with my work and no one was really paying attention, as well as the fact that delays with evaluations in the department are not a surprise in any way. It's actually a joke. It's often joked about. My supervisor tried to use a delay with the assessments and evaluations for Manager T as a reason for not holding him accountable for his theft of someone else's work, continued lack of leadership, and lying about everything under the sun to deflect from any wrongdoing on his part. His lack of evaluations, wow. Just to name a few of his struggles in the positions, by the way. The difference with this is that his supervisor was fighting a battle for the boilerplate, is what I call it, the battle of the boilerplate. They wanted automatically for the evaluations to be the same. Manager T's supervisor at the time refused to lie and just pass him along with a boilerplate evaluation simply because of his rank. Without any hint, I had asked for an assessment of those who reported directly to the supervising sergeant. What was returned to me in an assessment of Manager T was spot on. Manager T simply never measured up. Here, Commander W was complaining about the manager not receiving evaluations for 2 years prior when, simultaneously, the supervising sergeant was in communication with the advocacy unit for the next steps and for him with his continued issues in the position. His actions did not line up with the requirements for the position, even after 2 programs to help him bring him up to speed. The 2 programs lasting 8 months. I mentored and counseled him for 8 months, one-on-one. First in an informal weekly meeting lasting 3 months, and then for 5 months under a signed agreement. These were the steps given by advocacy to assist with steps toward needs improvement, an evaluation grade he had earned. And I was willing to work with him rather than going full all in. Commander W would lie and say that I had done nothing to warrant the need for unit performance mentoring, which he could have gone on immediately, when all that was required was placement under the program, and I had added additional training before even considering this step for him. Sadly, he is still in the position today, which shows that LASD is happy with incompetent leadership. Commander W was upset that Manager T had not received evaluations in 2 years. Well, I had to inform and remind her that I had not received any in 3. When she attempted to use this as an excuse for not holding him accountable, and I pointed out this fact, she threw her usual tantrum. As a matter of fact, she was always complaining and throwing tantrums about something or another. But the real kicker was the fact that she always showed her hand when approaching me with yet another anonymous gripe that she or someone else had obviously made up. And me being ready with a truth response to her lies infuriated her. As a matter of fact, everything I did gradually started to infuriate her. Ask yourself, how was I, in part 1 of this series, speaking about anonymous lies when the investigation had not been concluded? It wasn't like the questioning in my own interview in early 2022 gave anything away. The investigator, Sergeant M, was dry, asked leading assumption questions as if I were already guilty, and never asked about the huge 3-ring 5-inch binder full of evidence that I walked into the interview with. Knowing I had done nothing wrong, I took all the whiny, lazy problem children employees' drama into the interview just in case. Problem is, Sergeant M and the Lieutenant S, who was in the room at the time, didn't want to know. They had their script. They had their marching orders. Moving on. When I finally got out the evaluations and I received them after the first 2 of the 3 missing evaluations had been held for more than a year from my discussion with my supervisor about the same, they were, wait for it, outstanding. They accurately described my actual work, which had been graded as outstanding by Commander M before the tantrum thrower. As the evaluations were late, he sent the information to Commander W to complete and an email to me confirming the same. Yet she held on to the information, and I would be fighting through Chief V's office to receive them, with both Chief V and her aide deflecting, delaying, and avoiding my emails. Dated in February of 2022, the evaluations were held until after I was issued paperwork for discipline in August of 2022. I didn't receive them until October of 2022, as the narratives didn't fit the lies, so they had to hold them. The third evaluation was then held for an additional year, while the chief and her aide played games and pretended to be confused as I repeatedly asked for them to be completed. I had reached out to them on many occasions after learning that Commander W, rightfully so, and for lack of a better word, ran. She had stopped responding after making a mess of the setup of the web weaving of the investigation lie. They deflected and delayed the issuance of that last evaluation, as even they knew that the information they would pad it with to fit a negative narrative was not accurate, nor was it deserved. It would not even rise to the level of something plausible. Instead, they lied to me in email after email, stalling at all opportunities while they continued to cook up more lies and defamation of my character. When I finally received the third evaluation, it was also rated as outstanding, but written like a needs improvement, or at best, meh, a competent rating. Some of the information had obviously been cut and pasted into the narrative assessment from someone else's evaluation, or left in from a pre-existing assessment that they used as a template from another person. I literally imagine the review and narrative being written by Chief V herself with a crayon, feverishly writing while gripping the crayon in her childlike puffy hand with her tongue sticking out of the side of her mouth in concentration. I would later learn that she had been in on it all along and tried to make me think she understood what I was going through by bad-mouthing the commander from our first meeting in March of the same year and later adding the assistant sheriff. I had been told by someone who knows her personally that she would never lie in support of LASD. Man, had that person been snowed. So let's talk about these intentional delays with my paperwork. Speaking of Chief V, there was a delay not only with my evaluations, but with my grievance about the 2-day suspension that I was given after all the atrocities I was accused of. If, and a big emphasis on if, I had done even half of what they were accusing me of through the use of mandated reporting buzzwords, workplace harassment, bullying, mistreatment of people with disabilities, etc. Unbelievable. A 2-day suspension was not the fitting discipline. But they had to make sure I received something to not be completely found to be liars themselves. They were already committed, right? Heaven forbid any of these liars stop the train and tell the truth. Lost in thought for a minute. 3 years in this. If I were a betting woman, though, I would say that someone in the middle of the game of dice, they were all playing with my career, realized that there was a chance that I wouldn't balk at a 2-day suspension or that I would take a lesser discipline in written form just to have this over with, as there was no way that they saw it being challenged. I mean, who challenges the Goliath of the nation's largest sheriff's department? Me. They would not miss following through with this insane plan to get retribution for a lame duck sergeant turned sheriff, especially not knowing the outcome of the election that was on the horizon in June of 2022. With me being interviewed on 3 occasions, twice in April and once in June, it's no coincidence that this was all happening while my husband's name was on the ballot. I wonder what all the critics with their "you're only doing this to support your husband's campaign" would have said if they knew the timeline of my sudden flip to becoming a gremlin from such a stellar career. Heaven forbid they as law enforcement officers be objective and get all the information first. But hey, many of these same critics with their comments on social media have their own views of people who look like me. Oops, I pulled that card that people speak of so much. But remember this, I can't pull a card from a deck. not extended my way. I digress. Chief V held my grievance for just shy of 8 months from the time issued to her game-playing secretary, Secretary Z, on her behalf. This was in September of 2022. It would be late April of 2023 when another added person to the game of dice, Chief T, would hear the grievance. It had been hot potatoed from the current acting assistant sheriff, who was the original signer on the discipline and now moving up in the world. Congratulations to him. As yet more gameplay was added to the mix. How many chiefs does it take to screw in a light bulb? Or in this case, hold a grievance hearing? Chief V knew she had lied to my face, and it's probably why she was not the signer on the discipline as well. Assistant Sheriff A became instantly unable to even hold a conversation with someone so far down the chain he had ridden up with a quickness and deflected my outreach in a manner of almost being confused that I would ask him to hear me out since he signed the discipline. Isn't that the way it should have gone? This was also a mess when you consider my outreach to the chief of staff for assistance, since I was being ping-ponged so much back and forth. What did I have to lose at this point? The game was being changed to have me treated differently in the overall process. I'm sure that none of them would want to face me and continue the lies right to my face. I know that Commander W knows my style of documentation, and Chief V made a statement one day regarding items missing from my office that let me know she knows my documentation style now too. I wonder who is reading my journal and the 2 red books right at this moment, or who had them destroyed. The chief of staff even set a stage of telling me to reach out to the acting assistant sheriff and also to think about where I wanted to work, since they were working on cases like mine, only to deflect and aid in continued destruction by doing nothing. After several conversations with me, he spoke to my husband. What is it about men going through my husband as if we didn't have separate applications for law enforcement over 30 years ago now? What in the chauvinistic men understand men better was that all about? Had he even asked me who I wanted to have hear my grievance? How about the person who allowed the opening of the case in the first place, or the one who signed the discipline? But no, they all had the grand idea of having another chief, Chief T, hear my grievance. The chief of staff had played both sides of it, all like Chief V. They were aware of the mistreatment of department members under the former regime. Being part of that regime, though, but speaking to that would have weakened their selections into their positions and remaining there with the new incoming sheriff. They didn't want to seem like they lacked the ability to perform in their own ranks, as Sheriff V had selected them and placed them in their positions. The most disheartening thing for me is with all the talk about wellness for staff members, it is a lesson in buzzwords and political theater. None of these so-called leaders thought about my husband and my family. Thankfully, I have strong faith, and this could have broken someone with such great work for so many years, only to have it all plummeted downward in an instant based on lies. What I thought was a plummet is turning into a way for me to help others who didn't have a voice and were in a similar fashion. They were silenced. So much for caring about a person's wellness, right? What if I hadn't been strong enough to take all this? Even my outreach to those at the very top of the organization fell on deaf ears. I get it. Your promotions and positions were all part of Sheriff V's regime. And to admit he was wrong would also question your positions and promotions, no? This meant the stakes were even higher for you. Many struggled with the thought of being replaced, and were not willing to sacrifice their stardom and positions of power for my sake. Look, I get it. It's not your problem. You have more pressing things to tend to. My well-being and family are obviously of no concern to you. It's not like you were in the top positions within the organization and actually swore an oath to be truthful and honorable. I would then wonder about your character. But nah, it's only about titles and not actual work. Just ask the FSU staff who were there for decades doing little or nothing. But please rest assured, what you meant to sweep under the rug should be fair game for me to speak to, right? It worked for you at the time. So allow me my chess move in either silence, by saying nothing now as well, or support. My outreach was ignored. I cannot begin to tell you how it felt to have people ignore obvious concerns I raised. No one was willing to put themselves out for me. And I completely understand. Let's just be very clear with all this. My documents speak for themselves, and the fact that now 7 people involved in all this are no longer reporting for duty each day is largely telling. I reached out to chiefs, commanders, captains, IAB, ISU, COC, OIG, LMNOP, and other entities. And although interested in what happened? They didn't even bother to address the concerns and offered no assistance with my concerns, aside from claiming to have contacted the intake specialist unit for all things rising to mandated reporting to make sure they reported the concerns they gleaned from their brief overview of my emails or conversations. One upper level executive told me to just let things play out. I would have had more respect for someone so high up on the rank chain if they had just told me not to bother, as they had no intentions of helping me. Instead, this person had a friend reach out and pretend to be concerned with my lawsuit and how things were going. Imagine the timing. I'm not stupid. I get it. But give me a break. I gave hints, messages in bottles, documents emailed, had messages to the Goodyear blimp displayed in the sky, and tons of documented proof, and still the Goliath that is the LASD was all too prepared to thump me aside for their ideas of optics. Maybe we ignore her outcry. If we do that, she will get tired and simply disappear. It's been 3 years and it's still going. I'm living it, so I know. I exhausted all measures and still the lies continued. Although I have not lost faith in the mission of being a law enforcement officer, I have lost faith in the people who pretend to stand for truth, honesty, and integrity while only standing for themselves. If they would treat me this way, what about the people on the streets? I saw this without surprises, as some of the hatred carried in these people's bones was learned behavior, deep-seated dislike, and even disdain for all I represent as a human being. It was there all along, and all it took was a few undeserved promotions and their dislike for differences, and it was a recipe for targeting a person who never deserved any of this. And before this angers any of you about the apparent difference in my race, allow me to explain that you should also take into account those who are intimidated by strength packaged in my race and gender, and all the pushback for me simply breathing the same air. I'm Black. How can anybody think that I'm smarter than anyone? According to Sheriff V. I've often said that if we spent less time doubling down on that hatred and focusing on a race card, we could put the entire deck down and get to work being a human race and fixing the negative mindsets that continue to be born and bred for a negative continuance in divisive behavior. My violation of my pull bar rights probably would be viewed the same way as pulling a race card. But if you know anything about the Peace Officers' Bill of Rights, you would know that there are violations within them that preclude officers from being mistreated while under investigation. Not only were my rights violated, When it was brought to the attention of those involved in my case, those rights were ignored. Here is a list of what I was exposed to in all this and what remains today unanswered and ignored. 3303C, the public safety officer under investigation shall be informed of the nature of the investigation prior to any interrogation. Prior to any investigation, you're supposed to know. I had only that my alleged conduct while on duty may have violated department policy. Well, duh. Riddle me this, Batman. Isn't that the same for all cases? How is that the nature of the investigation? Unbelievable. I can't make this up. 3305. It's about adverse comments. Personnel files, opportunities to read and sign things before they're placed in your file. Refusal to sign is the only way that you just go ahead and stick it in the actual file. No public safety officer shall have any comment adverse to his interest entered in his personnel file or any other file used for any personnel purposes by his employer without the public safety officer having first read and signed the instrument containing the adverse comment, indicating he is aware of such comment, except that such entry may be made if after reading such instrument, the public safety officer refuses to sign it. Should a public safety officer refuse to sign, the fact shall be noted on that document and signed or initialed by such officer. That means I would still be aware of it, but I'm not in agreement with it and I'm refusing to sign it. I had a whole case placed in my file 2 months before I knew it was even a thing. Then it wasn't a thing because it was a lie and didn't rise to the level of a claim made by the investigators and sanctioned by IAB. A mess. And one the captain of IAB was obviously okay with, as the email exchange I had with him had me scratching my head and wonder if he even knew what POBAR was. Maybe not. 3306 allows for a response to adverse comments in the personnel file. Needs to be timely, though. A public safety officer shall have 30 days within which to file a written response by any adverse comment entered in his personnel file. Such written response shall be attached to and shall accompany the adverse comment. I wonder if they added what I emailed to the IAB captain. I submitted a dispute to the placement of information in my personnel record without my knowledge, and the captain of IAB ignored it, even after being somewhat unsure if he had the information he was responding to correctly. Using words like, "It's my understanding that this doesn't rise to that level." Excuse me, sir. Your understanding could be wrong, and I don't remember a section in the policy about the fact that you being captain meant the new gauge of anything in the policy was only rising to what you understood. But okay. 3309, search of locker or storage space, consent search warrant. This one's a real interesting one. No public safety officer shall have his locker or other space for storage that may be assigned to him searched except in his presence, or with his consent, or unless a valid search warrant has been obtained, or where he has been notified that a search will be conducted. This section shall apply only to lockers or other space for storage that are owned or leased by the employing agency. Hey, someone stole 2 red books and a journal out of my office. I had no idea. Now, which one of you executives still has them? A statement made by Chief V let me know that she knew exactly which journal I was speaking of when I called her. She even had an inquiry done, and I wish she would have been as fast on the draw with following through on that inquiry as the one in this false case they put on me. It's a crime under Penal Code Section 135.5 PC, too. So how did you know exactly which journal I was speaking of? 135.5 PC says that any person who knowingly alters, tampers with, conceals, or destroys relevant evidence in any disciplinary proceeding against a public safety officer for the purpose of harming that public safety officer is guilty of a misdemeanor. Now, whose personnel file needs a note in it now? Well, when the first case didn't make it, they just put in a second case. That last POBAR violation leads me right into the next topic. I guess that's when the first lie was challenged. Instead of addressing it, they did the best thing possible for them. Simply add another case to make it worse in my file. When I say in my file, I mean literally in my personnel records. Not a problem in the big scope of things, except they forgot one tiny little detail to tell me. To let it be known that the information was in my file. Nope. They just put it in my file in July with a lie about learning of the nature of this incident in March. What took so long to stick it in my file? And then they served me with the case in September, 6 months after the pretend awareness that I had failed to report a policy of equality complaint that was told to me. If I had failed to do such a thing, wouldn't it have to be something that rose to the level of reporting? So there are certain characteristics which are deemed protected in the workplace. I have an acronym to help me remember them, actually. There's age, ancestry, race, religion, marital status, medical condition, sex, sexual orientation, color, national origin, ethnicity, and disability. I think I got those 12 right. Because my acronym was 2 arms CNED. Makes no sense to you, but it does to me. I know that there have since been others added to this list, and I'm going to have to update my acronym, but hopefully you're tracking me on this so far. It needed to rise to that level. Nothing, and I do mean nothing, in the allegations placed in a case that was opened against me a second time rose to the level of any of those protected classes. What's even better is that I was notified about the complaint in 2019 with both the summary of the allegation and findings that it did not rise to the level of violation of the POE policy. And I even had an email directly sent to me about the same. Nowhere in the complaint was I mentioned, and it never was documented as a POE. However, Captain K of the Internal Affairs Bureau let this ride under his command. Like playing a hand in poker. Not his life, not lies on him, nothing that would have an effect on him, his world. So who cared? It was all about following the script. I am believing that he has been handsomely rewarded for this foul behavior, and even was informed that he was the person pushing for an even stiffer discipline in my case. Wow. I don't even remember meeting the guy, but I do recall a conversation that may have just sparked his just add water disdain for me, simply because of someone I know and think highly of, with him not sharing this same sentiment. I'm wondering if the investigator, Sergeant K, or her immediate supervisor, Lieutenant P, had any idea that this did not rise to the level of reporting. Can you imagine being the person to serve a platter of dung to someone and have to convince them that it is not, in fact, dung? After sending proof in documentation form that this should never have been a case in the first place, Sergeant K tapped the hand of her supervisor, backed out, and suddenly Lieutenant P and I were in discussion via email. She had the nerve to give me a lesson about how to properly report any concerns that I might have. Seriously? Once again, a clear display of the unwillingness of many to push whatever is placed in front of them. To push that narrative regardless, they are unwilling to do the right thing without any intellect, common sense of thought, or consideration for the damage they could do to another human being. I got placed under investigation for a POE that wasn't a POE. That's all I was talking about just now. I would wager to bet that they would defend these actions and resort to trying to pick apart my openness about all of this. I can't air dirty laundry if it has been properly and appropriately cleaned, dried, pressed, and put away. Emphasis on the word properly, please, as LASD shouldn't have dirty laundry this grimy. It is important to me to own any part that I played in the derailment of my career, which honestly, I didn't have a part. Ooh, sorry. Hang on a minute. I'm expecting a call. Hello? I'm sorry. Give me a minute. I need to take this. It's my mentor. Hey, Israel. How are you? What's that? You're so right. My career was not derailed. I get it. My destiny was activated. Yeah, that is the perfect title for the 4th book in the series. That's awesome. Destiny activated. Let's go. Okay. I got to get back to filming, so I'll call you later. Yeah. And thank you so much. I appreciate you and your beautiful family. I got to go. Talk soon. Bye. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Where was I? There's so much, and I can't cover it all. Interestingly enough, these people were willing to run with whatever was handed to them without any independent thought. My life and that of those I love meant little to them. Worse yet, in all this, people who worked hard and mean so much to me for being the good people that they are, willing to do the right thing, were harmed in all of this. You know who you are and what you mean to me, and I promise you, truth will be told despite the lies told about each of you. The Bible has a scripture in Isaiah 6:8. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?" And I said, "Here am I. Send me." I pray and know that any portion of my story already shared has been the send me that I am willing to be. God, please use me in this. My successes, even while going through all of this, was a testament to what God can do with a mess made by others. Even they are part of the life script. And as my mentor has continued to say, my career was not derailed. My destiny was activated. So stay tuned. Grab my books. This is the first one. There's more coming. Please reach out to connect with me if you have questions, but please tell me, and don't use the keyboard courage of social media to speak to things that you are not informed of and that you don't know. I know who I am, and more importantly, whose I am, and God never makes mistakes. Bye for now.